Hello, and welcome to your video lecture for Chapter 4. Today we're going to talk about the IMC planning process. The IMC planning process is going to be very important to you as you work through your project, and you'll see why after the first couple of slides. It's not the sexiest module or the sexiest chapter in the world because we really don't talk a lot about communication. We really talk about understanding your customer and understanding your customer's really current state and where your customer competes and their competition and those types of things. But it's really important to understand this because without that, then we really can't communicate to their customers or their potential customers. So we really need to understand our customers first, and then once we understand them, we can communicate to them. So I hope you enjoy it. I tried to make it as upbeat as I can, and I tried to make it as glib and as fast as I possibly can, but still get the points across. Until then, I look forward to seeing you on Monday. So as I said in the introduction, Chapter 4, the IMC planning process, is all about really understanding where our customers and our market is so that we can plan a marketing plan and an advertising and a promotional campaign around that particular market and that particular client. The key thing here is this model. Now, if you remember, back in class at the very beginning of class, and you may or may not remember this, I said that your project for your client is really a three-legged stool or a three-pillared project. The first project is current state, understanding where the customers are, the markets that the customer is in, their products, their positioning, and that type of thing. The second pillar is really around your creative and your creative strategy. And then the third pillar is implementation. This model that you see in front of you is an excellent model for the first pillar in your project. Your first pillar in your project should have customers and competition and communication and target market and budget and objectives, including the SMART goal and product positioning and all those types of things. And so as you move through this particular chapter, you should have your project in mind and your customer in mind and your client in mind so that you understand really what needs to go into that first pillar. This chapter is really explaining the model that you see in front of it. And we start with customers. One of the things that we've got to understand about our clients is who are their customers? Who are their current customers? Who are their former customers? And what is their target customers or their potential new customers? And it gets into segmentation, which we're going to get into in just a minute. It gets into target market, etc. The other thing that we need to understand about our particular client, because remember, we're trying to communicate to these customers or to this target market through all types of IMC, we also need to understand who is our competitors' customers, because those competitors' customers are oftentimes potential new customers for our client. So with the IMC process, we also need to understand our competition. In order to understand our strategic advantage and our competitive advantage, we need to understand our competition. One of the key things that we're going to do for our clients, and one of the things that I'm trying to teach you in this particular course, is we need to communicate our strategic advantage and our competitive advantage in some type of creative and put it on some type of vehicles. So understanding our customers, what vehicles they use, and what creatives are best served for them is important. But also we need to understand how are we positioned with regards to our competition. So we need to identify our major competitors. We need to identify our competitors' communication strategies and tactics so that we can either emulate those or we can do better than what they are. So the best way to understand your competition and the positioning of your competition is really through primary or secondary data. Primary data, as we know, is data straight from the proverbial horse's mouth, or data such as survey data, focus group data, and those types of things. Secondary data is really the stuff that we get secondhand or off the internet and things. I don't expect you guys for your current state to get primary research. In order to do that, we'd have to go through IRB approval and those types of things. But what I do expect you to do is understand the current market or the current state of your particular client. And doing that, you're going to have to get a lot of secondary data. You're going to have to get data on their positioning, on their competition, who their competitors are, target market, etc. So speaking of target market, let me get this out of the way here so you can see it. Yeah, I'll put it down here. How's that? Speaking of target markets can be either consumer markets, business-to-business markets, or both. In most of your cases, your target market is going to be, in most of your clients' cases, that is, your target market is going to be consumer markets. In some cases, though, particularly with one client, the target market is a business-to-business market. So your target market really looks at market segment, what are the different market segments, and market segmentation. The next few slides are all about market segments and market segmentation, starting with the methods of segmenting a consumer market. There are 6. I know it says 7, but there are 6 methods of segmenting a consumer target market. I don't look at generational segmentation as a segmentation in its own. I think generational segmentation is part of demographic segmentation and psychographic segmentation. So when I ask you, how many methods of segmentation are there? Instead of saying 7, you should say 6. It's demographic, psychographic, geographic, geodemographic, benefits, and usage. I know the book and many professors out there use generations segmentation, which means millennials and Zs and Xers and baby boomers, as a segmentation method. I really think that generational segmentation is part of demographic and psychographic segmentation. And we're going to get into that in just a few minutes. So the first one is demographic segmentation. The first slice for demographic segmentation is gender, male versus female. There is a significant difference, obviously, not only in what males and females want and what they purchase, etc., but there's a major difference in how they purchase, where they purchase, etc. Female consumers control 66% of the spending, of all the spending in households. Female consumers, and let me move this again, sorry about that. Female consumers deal with financial advisors. They buy and sell stocks for the most part, and they deal with household's primary accountant, and they deal with household purchases. So many creatives, especially for household products or personal products, etc., are based towards females and are targeted towards female consumers because they control the spending. So if you look at a lot of your consumer products, many of your consumer products are targeted at females. Another demographic way of segmenting would be income and ethnic groups. Income is a demographic segment, but obviously based on how much people purchase. Many products are segmented by income. If you look at cars, Lexus is segmented by income. Rolex watches and many of your luxury items are segmented by income. Ethnic groups are also another segmentation. Ethnic group being Hispanic, African, African American, Asian, those types of things. Those are all basis of demographic segmentation. Now, psychographic segmentation is completely different. As I was saying, psychographic segmentation describes consumers' attitudes, their hobbies, their needs, their wants, their interests, their opinions. Psychographic segmentation talks about people that ski or people that play sports or people that read books. It combines both demographic profiles as well as hobbies, interests, and opinions to psychographic segmentation. A big portion of psychographic segmentation is Val's framework. Val's framework was instrumental in really describing or segmenting different people in the way that they speak. I'm going to show you a video. I'm going to have to take this down. Well, let me pause it. I'll be right back and then I'll show you a video. Sorry, I'm back. As I was saying, here's a short video on Val's framework or psychographic segmentation.
Hello class. Have you any marketing concepts that need explaining?
Professor Siegfried, what is Val's framework?
Well, Sarah, VAL stands for Values, Attitudes and Lifestyles. Is a proprietary research methodology used for psychographic market segmentation. Market segmentation is designed to guide companies in tailoring their products and services to appeal to the people most likely to purchase them. VALS was developed in 1978 by social scientist and consumer futurist Arnold Mitchell and his colleagues at SRI International. It was immediately embraced by advertising agencies. VALS draws heavily on the work of Harvard sociologist David Risman and psychologist Abraham Maslow. The VALS framework gives more details about 8 demographic groups. First group are the innovators. These consumers are on the leading edge of change, have the highest incomes, and such high self-esteem and abundant resources. Their consumer choices are directed toward the finer things in life. Example would be prestige, goods and services. Second group are thinkers. These consumers are the high resource group of those who are motivated by ideals. They are mature, responsible, well educated. Professionals. Their leisure activities center on their homes, but they are well informed about what goes on in the world and are open to new ideas and social change. They have high incomes but are practical consumers and rational decision makers. Third group are believers. These consumers are the low resource group of those who are motivated by ideals. They are conservative and predictable consumers who favor established brands. Their lives are centered on family, church, community, and the nation. They have modest incomes. Fourth group are achievers. These consumers are the high resource group of those who are motivated by achievement. They are successful, work-oriented people who get their satisfaction from their jobs and families. They are politically conservative and respect authority and the status quo. They favor established products and services that show off their success to their peers. Fifth group are called strivers. These consumers are the low resource group of those who are motivated by achievements. They have values very similar to achievers but of fewer economic, social, and psychological resources. Style is extremely important to them as they strive to emulate people they admire. Sixth group are called experiencers. These consumers are the high resource group of those who are motivated by self-expression. They are the youngest of all the segments, with a median age of 25. They have a lot of energy, which they pour into physical exercise and social activities. They are avid consumers, spending heavily on clothing, fast foods, music, and other youthful favorites, with particular emphasis on new products and services. Seventh group are called makers. These consumers are the low resource group of those who are motivated by self-expression. They are practical people who value self-sufficiency. They are focused on the familiar family, work, and physical recreation and have little interest in the broader world. As consumers, they appreciate practical and functional products. The eighth group are called survivors. These consumers have the lowest incomes. They have too few resources to be included in any consumer self-orientation. They are the oldest of all the segments, with a median age of 61. Within their limited means, they tend to be brand loyal consumers. So overall, the Valves framework is a useful tool to understand psychographic segments.
Thanks, Professor, for your explanation.
Okay, I apologize that the video audio was so low on that video, but I think it's really important that you understand Val's framework. You have the, in front of you there, you have the 8 different categories and kind of a, and a description of each one of the categories. So that will suffice, but that is really a good video if you're talking about Val's framework. This is generational segmentation. So if you take a look, you got boomers, you got X's, you got millennials, and you got Generation Z's. Above the boomers are what we call the greatest generation. There's not very many of them left, so they really didn't get a category. What I really like about this chart with regards to generational segmentation is it talks about age. For instance, boomers being 45 to 64, Xers being 61 to 81, millennials being 75 to 95, and then you guys are Generation Z. What I really like about this is it talks about the population, but if you look down and it looks at global events, you start getting into more of the psychographic segmentation, where with boomers, really the global events were the assassination of JFK, with Generation X, which is what I'm part of. If you look at Generation X, you know, the big thing for us was Watergate scandal and the Berlin Wall falling and the crumble of the Soviet Union. With millennials, it's really the rise of the terrorism and the Twin Towers. And with UZs, it's really social media and the rise of social media and how social media dictates your life. So I really like this because it combines, and again, generational segmentation combines both the demographic as well as psychographic segmentation. Oops, excuse me. Geodemographic segmentation combines demographic census and geographic census. I've said this before, there's a huge difference between, say, a 18-year-old girl in Georgia and an 18-year-old girl in California. They think differently, they're exposed to different things, the culture is different. So with geodemographic segmentation, it takes demographic segmentation, age, income, those types of things, and then puts it with geographic segmentation. So it combines both of them. PRISM is an organization that really subgroups geodemographic segmentation, and many marketers use it for advertising, etc. Benefit segmentation, you've got segmentation based on benefits. The fitness industry is a good one. The other one is insurance. They segment their clients and their customers based on whether they want full coverage, whether they want just collision, whether they want term life, all those types of things. So that's benefit segmentation. And then the final segmentation is usage segmentation. Those that use a lot are segmented into those that use a little. And they're segmented the way that products are, the way that product sales are. Sizes of products, for instance, look at Coca-Cola. You can buy a can of Coke, you can buy a 2-liter of Coke. So it's segmented really into usage. You can buy a 6-pack of Coke or a 12-pack of Coke or what have you. B2B markets, really the main thing is geographic location, because the big part of B2B is personal selling. A lot of people use personal selling as their method of communication to their customer, as their method of promotion. So really geographic is usually the first slice, and then it's size of business or usage, and then it's industry and customer value. So that kind of pretty much takes care of segmentation. Remember, there's 6 ways of segmenting. There's demographic, geographic, geodemographic, there's benefits, there's usage, and there's psychographic. Now we get into product positioning. Product positioning is created in the consumer's mind, and it's regard to the competition. That's one of the reasons why we need to understand competition, so we can understand the product positioning of our clients. So without understanding product or competition, you wouldn't understand positioning. For instance, look at the way Hyundai is positioned against Lexus. Hyundai is positioned as value, as lower cost, whereas Lexus is positioned as higher cost, higher value, and luxury. Positioning is really created by quality and price. Those are really the two things, quality and price. And finally, image is a big portion of product positioning. So here's some product positioning approaches. Most of it is positioned against your competitors. You can position product attributes. For instance, I know that Apple right now is coming out with their iPhone and they're positioning it based on the camera. They have 3 lenses for their camera. They also have positioned it in the past being water resistant and those types of things. Price is the easiest way to position a product because with price there is a mystique of quality. People perceive the higher the price, the greater the quality of the product. Not necessarily true, but it's perceived that way, and that's why positioning goes towards price and quality. The thing about positioning, it's never completely fixed. It applies to both consumer and business-to-business markets. International positioning is important. I know that Starbucks is positioned internationally as a premium coffee. It's positioned here as a premium coffee, positioned internationally as a premium coffee. And then one of the critical components of positioning is your brand image and brand management. Nike does a great job of positioning their brand globally and licensing that swoosh. So now we get into communication objectives, and it really gets into what we would call, in our particular scenario, our SMART goal. Remember, SMART stands for specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. So those really are our communications objective, is really to hit our SMART goal. Other communication objectives is to develop brand awareness and increase brand category and demand, enhance purchases, build customer traffic. One of the things that I have a problem with Clow and Back is my objectives always have to be measurable. And the first one, brand awareness and category demand, is very, very hard to measure. Reinforced purchase decisions is really hard to measure. If you look, and enhancing firm image is very hard to measure. So when I teach this class, I always talk about communications objectives being an objective based upon really something that's measurable. That's why we use a SMART goal: increase or decrease what, by how much, by when, because when we increase or decrease, we can measure that, and it's all part of measuring. Okay, so now we turn our attention to the relationship between advertising and sales. There's a lot of different things that impact the relationship between advertising and sales, such as the threshold effect, the margin of diminishing returns, carryover effect, and the decay effect. For instance, and what I'm getting at right here is the next slide. If in fact you look at this graph right here, and you can see the pointer going up, if in fact there is a linear relationship between sales and promotional expenditures, for instance, for every $1 of promotional expenditures you would get $1 in sales, people would advertise all the time. That is not realistic, and that's why it says that graph is an unrealistic assumption about the relationship between expenditures of promotion and sales. Moreover, it's more like the bottom graph, where you advertise, and then all of a sudden it catches on and your sales go up, and then eventually you have a margin of diminishing returns. This is your profits. Your profits actually dip, and then they start going up, and then once you hit that margin of diminishing returns, your profits actually go down. So that is more realistic. So because of that, we've got to talk about budget. And when you talk to your clients, you need to also understand their budget. Oh, by the way, this is a decay effects model where sales goes up for a while because of promotion, and then eventually, if you stop advertising, it goes down. That's why consumer advertising is so prevalent. That's why insurance companies and beverages and foods are constantly advertising because of the decay effect. So really, what are the methods of determining marketing communications budget? The number one out there, and it shouldn't be, it should be return on investment. It should be return on investment, but it's not. The number one out there is what can we afford? Oftentimes the budget is whatever's left over at the end of the month, what we can afford, etc. Now, when you look at consumer products, it's not. It's really percentage of sales, and it's also built in to the cost of goods sold. So let's take a can of Coke. A can of Coke probably costs a nickel to make, but when you put the advertising expenses on top of that, the cost of goods sold probably goes up to 25 to 30 cents per can. Other ones are objective and task, quantitative models and modeling and those types of things. So really percentage of sales, we've talked about that. Oftentimes we see a type of budget that meets the competition. Pepsi tends to do a lot of meet the competition. Coke is a major advertiser. Pepsi is trying to meet the competition with their advertising campaign. The same thing with insurance company. The more one insurance company will advertise, the more the other ones will, because of the decay effect and really the meeting the competition. Again, what we can afford is a bad way, but it's done often, and really it's set after all other items is budgeted. It's what's left over at the end of the month. And then also objective and task. Sometimes it's the budget is determined by objective. If you really want to drive sales in a particular time, say for Christmas, then you're going to heavily advertise around Christmas. If you look at Apple spends the majority of its budget in advertising starting from September all the way to about December the 20th. Why? Because they bring out a new product all the time for Christmas. They make good Christmas gifts. People buy them for Christmas gifts, and that's where their budget is. So a lot of people will do it based on objective and task. Payout planning and quantitative models are really modeling what the payout is versus what the cost is and how much the return on investment is once you get through the threshold effects, etc. So your IMC components, we talked about that. We're going to get into it very heavily as we get into implementation, etc. You've got traditional advertising, which is television, radio, newspaper, direct mail, magazine, billboard, and I'm missing one. I can't remember the other one. You got trade promotions, which is mostly B2B, which is trade shows and also trade magazines. Consumer promotions, those consumer promotions can be sales promotions. Media spending, alternative media, and business-to-business media spending. This is the breakdown of marketing expenditures. Advertising or traditional advertising is still 41%. POPs and consumer promotions are 27%. Trade promotions are 27.5%. So trade promotion and consumer promotion are just about the same. And then, of course, there's alternative media spending. Branded entertainment, we're going to talk about that later. Entertainment, digital, interactive marketing, online, mobile, social media, all of those are alternative media spending. As you can see, really the online or mobile accounts for the majority of it, and that's because of search engine optimization, or SEO. That's how Google gets all of their money. So with that, that's going to conclude our video lecture for Chapter 4. I will see you all on Monday. Looking forward to it. And until then, have a great weekend.